God's chosen ones, they mocked you, yet you were sent to bless them. Welcome. Not everyone will understand this message, but if it stirs your soul, it was meant for you. Have you ever watched someone trade gold for garbage and then act surprised when they come up empty-handed? It's baffling, isn't it? But history, psychology, and even the Bible confirm this truth. People often regret the opportunities they ignored far more than the mistakes they made. The sting of a wrong decision fades over time, but the weight of a missed blessing lingers like an unshakable shadow. Now, here's where things get interesting. You weren't just another person in their life, you were the blessing they failed to see. God placed you in their path with purpose, wrapped in grace, shining with divine favor. But instead of cherishing you, they overlooked your value, dismissing what they should have honored. They chased after something fleeting, something easy, something they thought was better, only to realize too late that they let go of a masterpiece while clinging to a mess. And now, regret isn't just a whisper in the back of their mind, it's a loud, unrelenting echo they can't escape. Have you ever experienced this firsthand? Comment 999 below. If this message speaks to you, because let's be honest, being taken for granted is one thing, but being betrayed by someone who once called you a blessing, that hits differently. And yet, even in the midst of that pain, God is still working. What they thought was their gain will turn into their greatest loss, and what felt like your heartbreak will be transformed into your breakthrough. To those of you who support this message through super thanks, I see you, I appreciate you. Your kindness is a light, and I pray that God blesses you abundantly in return. May your life overflow with divine favor, peace, and joy beyond measure. Now take a deep breath and buckle up. This isn't just a story of betrayal, this is a reckoning, a revelation, a turning point. And by the time we're done, you'll see exactly why God allowed it to happen. Let's dive in. You're a real blessing, but they betrayed you for a nasty. You extended kindness, not out of naivety, but out of strength. Yet they mistook it for weakness. When you exercised patience, they assumed it was ignorance. When you forgave, they thought it was desperation. But they never understood that your kindness was not a flaw, it was a deliberate choice, a testament to your resilience. You've endured battles they could never imagine. And instead of allowing hardship to harden your heart, you chose to remain compassionate. Do they not realize how much courage it takes to be gentle in a world that glorifies indifference? Many would rather build walls, meet hostility with hostility, and guard themselves against the pain of betrayal. But you chose a different path. You remained human, and that is what confused them. Instead of appreciating your rarity, they played games. They assumed that because you tolerated disrespect before, you always would. But that was their greatest mistake. Kindness, true kindness, has boundaries. And when they crossed those sacred lines, they didn't just lose your loyalty, they lost access to the kind of peace that only people like you bring into the lives of others. They never truly saw how much you carried for them, how your presence uplifted them in ways they never acknowledged. It wasn't until you walked away that they began to notice the silence. The conversations that once calmed their chaos are now echoes of the past. The understanding they took for granted has vanished, and now, they are left grappling with an emptiness they never realized existed until you were gone. The irony is undeniable. They are now learning, in the hardest way possible, that hearts like yours are not just rare, they are nearly impossible to replace. They gambled, believing you would always be there, no matter how they treated you. But they did not just lose the game, they lost the greatest prize of all, you. Even in Scripture, this pattern is seen time and again. Consider Joseph, whose own brothers betrayed him, selling him into slavery out of jealousy. They mistook his grace and goodness for weakness, believing they had power over his fate. Yet in the end, it was Joseph who rose to power, and they had to come before him in need, never realizing that the very person they discarded would be the one to hold their future in his hands. Genesis 50:20. Isn't that always the case? Those who take kindness for granted eventually come to regret it. History repeats itself, even in the real world. Think of Princess Diana, a woman whose heart radiated compassion. She was mocked, mistreated, and misunderstood by those closest to her. Yet the world cherished her kindness. It wasn't until she was gone that many finally realized how irreplaceable she was. So ask yourself, How many times have people around you mistaken your goodness for weakness? How often have they played games, assuming you would always stay? And now, as they sit in the silence of your absence, do they finally understand what they have lost? See, your light threatened their insecurities. You never had to force your light to shine, it radiated naturally from within. Yet, instead of celebrating your glow, they resented it. Was it your fault that you carried an energy that others couldn't ignore? That when you walked into a room, people took notice, respected you, and even admired you? No. But to those who were insecure, your very existence felt like a threat. And when insecure people feel threatened, they don't seek to grow alongside you, they seek to diminish you. They tried everything to make you question yourself, the subtle digs, the backhanded compliments, the moments where they planted doubt in your mind, all designed to make you second-guess your own worth. Why? Because your confidence, your authenticity, and your ability to shine without effort made them uncomfortable. They weren't ready to confront their own insecurities, so they wanted you to shrink instead. Have you ever noticed how some people prefer to keep you small rather than rise to your level? They wished you were quieter, less bold, more hesitant. Anything that wouldn't challenge the fragile image they had of themselves. But here's what they never understood. Real light cannot be dimmed. It is not snuffed out by gossip. It is not overshadowed by jealousy. No amount of insecurity from others can put out the fire that God has placed within you. As Jesus said in Matthew 5:14-16, you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. You kept glowing, and instead of drawing inspiration from you, they let bitterness consume them. That bitterness eventually turned into betrayal. They believed that cutting you out, excluding you, or pushing you aside would somehow elevate them. But what happened instead? It exposed just how small they were without you. Now they are trapped in the very darkness they once wished upon you. And the irony, they are beginning to realize that your light didn't just make you shine. It illuminated everything around you, including them. When you were in their lives, they unknowingly benefited from your radiance, your wisdom, and your uplifting spirit. But they made their choice. They chose insecurity over self-improvement. They chose jealousy over growth, and that choice cost them more than they ever imagined. This is not a new story. It happened to Joseph in the Bible when his own brothers, driven by envy, sold him into slavery, Genesis 30:7, 18-20. They thought that by removing him they would be free to rise. But what happened? Joseph's light only grew stronger. God's favor followed him wherever he went, and in the end, the very ones who betrayed him had to return, seeking his help. What they meant for evil, God turned for good, Genesis 50:20. Even in modern times, we see this same pattern unfold. Oprah Winfrey, a world-renowned media mogul and philanthropist, was once told early in her career that she wasn't fit for television. People dismissed her, tried to push her aside, and attempted to limit her potential. But instead of dimming her light, she allowed it to shine brighter, building an empire that changed lives around the world. What if she had listened to those voices that tried to make her doubt herself? So ask yourself, how many people in your life have tried to make you doubt your own brilliance? How many have attempted to minimize you, only to realize later that they were the ones standing in their own way? And now, as they sit in the shadows of their own insecurities, do they finally recognize that your light was never the problem? Bennett chased shortcuts, not substance. They believed that quick victories would last forever. They chased what was easy, flashy, and right in front of them, convinced that they were making the smarter choice. Meanwhile, you were quietly and diligently laying a foundation, one built on patience, wisdom, and long-term vision. But they lacked the endurance to walk that path with you. Instead of investing in something that would stand the test of time, they went after shortcuts and temporary highs. But tell me, how often do we see people exchange something of great value for the illusion of instant success? They craved results immediately. The thrill of applause, the fleeting excitement of recognition, the rush of feeling important. But what they failed to understand is that the most meaningful rewards take time. Proverbs 13:11 reminds us, wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. Do they not realize that success built on a shaky foundation will eventually crumble? Did they ever stop to ask themselves if their shortcuts would truly lead to something lasting? They overlooked your worth because you weren't offering them overnight success. You were the rare and valuable investment they weren't wise enough to recognize. Have you ever wondered why some people fail to see value in things that don't bring instant gratification? They chose speed over substance, and now the irony is undeniable. The quick wins they chased have already vanished. The applause has faded, the excitement has died down, and the distractions they once prioritized have left them empty. Meanwhile, the foundation you built with purpose and patience is standing strong. And now you are thriving. But here's the real lesson. What stings them the most isn't just that they lost you. It's that they have to sit back and watch you rise without shortcuts. They have to witness your success, knowing that you did it the right way, while they took the easy route and fell short. Can you imagine how painful it must be for them to realize that they bet on the wrong thing and lost everything that was truly worth having? This is a pattern we see time and again in history. Consider Esau, who let his momentary hunger dictate his destiny. He traded his birthright, the very blessing that would define his future, for a single meal. Genesis 25:29-34. Did he even think twice before making that choice? Did he consider the weight of what he was throwing away? In his desperation, he chose the immediate over the eternal. But when the time came for him to claim his rightful inheritance, it was gone. How devastating must it have been for him to realize that he had surrendered something priceless for something temporary. And even today, the world is full of stories like this. Take Mike Tyson, for example, a legendary boxer who once had it all. With over $400 million to his name, he lived recklessly, spending without thought, chasing pleasure without considering the consequences. Do you think he ever paused to consider how quickly it could all disappear? It wasn't until he lost nearly everything that he understood the cost of impulsive choices. Now he speaks openly about the mistakes that led to his downfall. How many people in your own life have made this mistake? How many have chosen momentary pleasure over something that could have truly changed their lives? And now, as they watch you succeed through patience, faith, and perseverance, do you think they finally understand that true greatness is not built in a day, but through a lifetime of wise choices? Or will they continue to chase after things that disappear as quickly as they arrive? The spiritual cost of betrayal. Betraying you didn't just cost them a relationship, it cost them something far greater. There is a weight to betrayal that extends beyond hurt feelings or broken trust. It disrupts something much deeper, spiritual alignment. When someone betrays a person with a pure heart, they don't just lose companionship, they lose access to the divine blessings that come with being connected to that person. Have they even realized the magnitude of what they've lost, or are they still blind to the truth? Your presence in their life was not a coincidence. God placed you there as a source of peace, wisdom, and spiritual covering. But they were too consumed by ego, jealousy, or greed to recognize it. They didn't understand that your presence shielded them from storms they weren't even aware of. How many times were they protected simply because they were connected to you? How many unseen battles were fought on their behalf just because they had access to your favor? Psalm 105:15 warns, "Do not touch my anointed ones, do my prophets no harm." Yet in their ignorance, they took that divine protection for granted. When they chose betrayal, they didn't just walk away from you, they stepped out of alignment with the path that was meant to elevate them. And here's the thing about divine law, cause and effect is inevitable. You cannot sever ties with someone carrying God's favor and expect life to remain the same. Doors that once opened for them now remain shut. Opportunities that used to come easily slip through their fingers. Rest becomes elusive, and no matter how much they chase peace, it seems to run further away from them. Is it punishment? No, it's spiritual cause and effect. When you betray someone favored by God, you lose access to that favor, period. We've seen this truth play out in Scripture. Consider Judas Iscariot, the disciple who betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. He thought he was making a calculated move, but in reality, he had traded his soul for temporary gain. What happened after his betrayal? The weight of his actions became unbearable. The very reward he sought became meaningless, and in despair, he ended his own life. Matthew 27, 3-5. What would have happened if Judas had chosen loyalty instead of greed? What blessings did he forfeit because of one moment of betrayal? Even in the modern world, we see this same pattern unfold. Think of Kanye West, a globally recognized musician and fashion mogul. He had everything: fame, influence, wealth. But when he severed ties with those who genuinely cared for his well-being and allowed ego to take control, his empire began to crumble. Business deals collapsed, doors that once seemed permanently open were slammed shut, and his public standing took devastating hits. Could it be that he lost not just earthly success, but also divine favor? Now, they watch from a distance as you continue to rise, protected, favored, and guided by the very blessings they threw away. Do you think they understand now? Do they finally realize that their betrayal was not just personal, but spiritual? Some losses cannot be undone. Some mistakes carry consequences that go beyond what the human eye can see. And this is the ultimate regret, knowing they once had something priceless, but chose chaos instead, and were their test. Some losses are not just painful, they are irreversible. They didn't understand the assignment. You weren't just another person passing through their life, you were their test. Not every connection is random. Some people are placed in our path as part of our spiritual journey, a divine appointment designed for growth and transformation. And sometimes you were meant to be that person for them. The assignment was simple: recognize, appreciate, and grow with the blessing they were given. But instead of embracing that opportunity, they let ego, selfishness, and short-sightedness cloud their judgment. Have you ever wondered why some people fail to see what's right in front of them? They had a chance to walk alongside you, to elevate with you, but they chose betrayal instead. And that single choice changed everything. What they didn't realize is that you were their test. Life presented them with someone who could bring peace, wisdom, and a deeper purpose into their journey. But instead of seeing you as a gift, they treated you as an obstacle or an afterthought. And life does not reward those who fail to recognize divine opportunities. Proverbs 10:22 reminds us, "The blessing of the Lord makes rich, and he adds no sorrow with it." But when a person mishandles their blessing, they don't just lose it, they invite sorrow into their lives. Their betrayal didn't just sever a connection, it turned what was meant to be a beautiful chapter into a bitter lesson. Now, as they watch you thrive, grow, and elevate without them, they are left grappling with the consequences of their actions. Have they realized yet that the answer was right in front of them the whole time? That they were trusted with something precious and they threw it away? This pattern isn't new, it is played out time and again. Even in the Bible, consider Saul and David. Saul was given a divine assignment to be king over Israel. But when David, a young warrior chosen by God, entered his life, Saul had a choice. He could have embraced David's anointing and walked in alignment with God's plan. But instead, he let jealousy consume him. He saw David as a threat rather than as part of his divine path. And what happened? Saul lost everything: the throne, his peace, and his favor with God. 1 Samuel 18:6-12. Had he understood the assignment, history could have been written differently. And even in our modern world, we see this play out. Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple, was once betrayed by the very company he built. He was forced out by those who failed to see his vision. They thought they could succeed without him, believing they didn't need his guidance anymore. But what happened? The company struggled without him, only to later realize that Jobs had been the key to their innovation all along. When he returned, Apple reached heights they never imagined. But imagine how much further they could have gone if they had valued him from the start. So what about the people who betrayed you? Do they understand now? Do they see that they were given a divine opportunity, but they let pride and foolishness blind them? Life has a way of making sure lessons are learned, even if it's the hard way. And that's exactly what they're facing now. A long, painful lesson that could have been their elevation, if only they had understood the assignment. One had traded legacy for momentary lust. They traded legacy for momentary lust, choosing temporary pleasure over something that could have lasted for generations. Some choices don't just affect the present, they echo far beyond the moment they are made. Betraying someone with a rare purpose isn't just a personal misstep, it's a generational loss. Did they even consider the weight of what they were throwing away? Or were they too caught up in the illusion of immediate satisfaction to realize the damage they were causing? When they walked away from you, they weren't just leaving a relationship behind. They were stepping out of alignment with a divine legacy. They went after lust, mistaking fleeting pleasure for something meaningful. The thrill was intoxicating for a moment, but like all shallow pursuits, it faded as quickly as it came. Proverbs 6:32 warns us, "Whoever commits adultery lacks sense. He who does it destroys himself." Lust doesn't build, it only consumes. And when it's done, it leaves nothing behind but ashes. They thought they were winning. They thought chasing after quick satisfaction meant they had the upper hand. But what do they have now? They are standing in the aftermath, looking at the ruins of what could have been, realizing they lost far more than they ever gained. How often do we see people gamble their future for something temporary, only to regret it when it's too late? Being connected to someone with divine purpose isn't just about love or loyalty, it's about alignment. When you walk alongside someone favored by God, blessings flow. Generations are impacted, foundations are built. But they weren't thinking about foundations. They weren't thinking about the long-term blessings that came from being in your presence. They were thinking about fleeting desires, about what was easy and accessible, about what required no sacrifice. And in doing so, they forfeited access to something eternal. This same mistake has played out time and again. Consider Samson, a man anointed by God, whose strength was unmatched. But what was his downfall? Lust. He chose Delilah, a woman who was never meant to be part of his destiny. She deceived him, and because of his desire for her, he lost his strength, his vision, and ultimately his life. Judges 16:1-21. Do you think Samson realized what he was trading away in the moment, or did the truth only hit him when it was too late? Think about Tiger Woods, one of the greatest golfers in history. He had it all: success, wealth, influence. But when scandal after scandal emerged about his infidelities, his entire world came crashing down. He lost endorsements, respect, and nearly destroyed his career. Why? Because he allowed temporary desires to outweigh long-term wisdom. And now, the ones who betrayed you are watching from a distance. They see you building, thriving, and moving with a purpose they can no longer touch. Do you think they ever stop and wonder what could have been? Do they ever lie awake at night, realizing that their choice cost them not just love, but legacy? That's the thing about purpose. It doesn't wait for people who can't see its value. And once it's gone, there are no shortcuts to getting it back. They made their choice, and unfortunately for them, it wasn't just a mistake. It was the loss of meaning, stability, and a future worth being proud of. And that's a loss they will never outrun. You were a mirror they couldn't face. Some people claim they want honesty, but what they really crave is comfort. They don't seek truth, they seek validation. But you weren't placed in their life to sugarcoat reality or play along with their illusions. You showed up as your real, unfiltered self, authentic, grounded, and unapologetically true. And that's where the problem started. Your presence didn't just inspire them, it exposed them. You were a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. They couldn't hide behind facades or distractions when you were around. Your confidence highlighted their doubts. Your kindness revealed their bitterness. Your growth made their stagnation painfully obvious. And instead of using that reflection as a chance to evolve, they chose to resent you for it. Have you ever noticed how some people lash out, not because they hate you, but because they hate what your existence forces them to see about themselves? It was never really about you, even though their words, their gossip, their betrayals may have felt deeply personal. The truth is, people don't attack what they hate, they attack what reveals what they hate about themselves. Just by being you, you made them uncomfortable. You didn't have to point out their insecurities. Your very presence did that on its own. And because they weren't ready to face their own weaknesses, they fought back. Maybe it was through subtle jabs, maybe through outright betrayal, or maybe through silent envy disguised as indifference. But their real battle wasn't with you. It was with their own reflection. What they failed to realize is that the mirror was never their enemy. It was their opportunity to grow. You weren't placed in their life to judge them. You were placed there to show them what was possible. But they weren't ready for that truth, and rather than rising to the challenge, they chose the easy way out. They became bitter instead of better. This same story has played out for generations. Think about Cain and Abel. Cain wasn't angry at Abel just for offering a more pleasing sacrifice to God. He was angry because Abel's righteousness exposed his own shortcomings, Genesis 4:3-8. Rather than reflecting on his own actions and striving to improve, Cain chose destruction. But did his attack on Abel change anything? No, it only sealed his own downfall. Take Kobe Bryant, one of the greatest basketball players of all time. His work ethic was unmatched, his discipline relentless. Yet teammates and rivals who weren't willing to match his dedication often resented him. They claimed he was too intense, too demanding. But was that really the problem, or was the real issue that his commitment forced them to confront their own lack of discipline? Now, the ones who resented you are stuck with the same insecurities they refused to confront, while you have moved on, stronger, wiser, and even more aligned with your purpose. They tried to break the mirror, but in doing so, they only shattered their own chance at becoming something greater. So ask yourself, how many times have you been punished simply for existing in your truth? How many people have pushed you away, not because you did anything wrong, but because they weren't ready to face their own reflection? And now, as you continue to grow, do they finally understand that the enemy was never you, but their own unwillingness to change? Wanted to were the blueprint. You were the blueprint, the original design for something rare, extraordinary, and divinely inspired. But they couldn't see it. Instead of recognizing the depth, brilliance, and uniqueness that made you who you are, they clung to what was easier to grasp, something simple and familiar. Why? Because they weren't prepared to handle the complexity of your God-given purpose. Instead of valuing what God placed before them, they reached for something that required little effort to understand, and even less vision to appreciate. But here's the undeniable truth. Shortcuts never lead to greatness. Did they really think they could replace something irreplaceable? Think of Joseph, the son of Jacob, whom God had chosen to carry a great destiny. His brothers, blinded by jealousy, failed to recognize his value and betrayed him, selling him into slavery, Genesis 37:18-28. They thought they had removed him from their lives, but in reality, they had set him on the path toward his divine calling. Isn't it astonishing how God allows rejection to become a setup for elevation? Just like Joseph, you were cast aside because they couldn't comprehend your true worth. They assumed they were making a smart decision, but now they are realizing they were chasing after something that lacks depth and substance. Now, they are out there, desperately searching for your confidence, your grace, your creativity, but all they find are hollow imitations. Do they not realize that God's chosen ones are one of a kind, that the anointing you carry cannot be duplicated? They tried to replace you, but no counterfeit will ever match the authenticity of what God placed within you. The irony is sharp. They threw away what was authentic and timeless for something fleeting and empty. Doesn't this remind you of Esau, who traded his birthright for a moment of temporary satisfaction? Genesis 25:29-34. He realized too late that he had given up something priceless for something worthless. And just like Esau, they now sit in the bitter realization that they fumbled a divine opportunity. They didn't just lose you, they lost the chance to build something meaningful alongside you. And now, as they attempt to build without the blueprint, nothing fits, nothing lasts, and nothing compares. What were they thinking? How did they expect to construct something solid without a foundation? People with real purpose, unique energy, and a visionary soul cannot be copied. God's masterpieces are once-in-a-lifetime creations, and you, His chosen one, are irreplaceable. History is filled with those who failed to recognize greatness when it stood before them. Take Nikola Tesla, a brilliant mind whose genius was overlooked and underappreciated in his time. The world failed to see the full extent of his vision, only to realize decades later that he was far ahead of his time. Does this not reflect your own story? They disregarded you, thinking they could find an easy replacement, but now they're beginning to see there is no substitute for something divinely crafted. As they scramble to recreate what you naturally embodied, you are already miles ahead, walking in the fulfillment of what they never had the foresight to imagine. While they look back in regret, you continue moving forward in victory, flourishing in the purpose God designed specifically for you. The real question is, will they ever truly understand what they lost, or will they keep chasing shadows while you continue to shine? When they bet against the wrong person, they thought they were making a calculated move, betting against you as if you were just another underdog, easily dismissed, easily replaced. They failed to recognize your value, your resilience, and the undeniable potential God placed within you. To them, you were just a temporary presence, someone they could walk away from without a second thought, without consequence. But what they didn't realize was that rejecting you wasn't just about turning away from a person, it was turning away from the very blessings they were too short-sighted to see. Did they really think they could overlook someone chosen by God and still prosper? Think of David before he became king. To the world, he was just a shepherd boy, an afterthought, the least of his brothers, 1 Samuel 16:11-13. Even his own family underestimated him. Yet, he was the one anointed for greatness. When Goliath stood before Israel, the odds seemed stacked against him. People bet against him because they only saw his outward stature. But what they didn't know was that he carried the power of God within him. And like David, you were never the underdog. You were simply underestimated by those who lacked vision. They thought rejecting you would leave you broken. But instead, it became your greatest source of strength. What they saw as a loss, you transformed into fuel. Every time they looked down on you, you were quietly preparing your next move, building something they couldn't even begin to comprehend. You weren't just bouncing back, you were ascending. And now, as they look around, they find themselves stuck in the ruins of their own poor choices, wondering why their world isn't aligning the way yours is. Could it be that they ignored the very key to their blessings? The doors they assumed would remain open for them are now slamming shut, while the ones they tried to block for you are opening with ease. Why? Because they bet against the wrong person. What they never accounted for was your resilience, your spiritual growth, and your ability to rise even when they tried to bring you down. Now all they can do is watch from the sidelines as you walk in the success, favor, and peace they never thought you would achieve. History is filled with those who were written off too soon. Consider Albert Einstein, a man who struggled in school and was even told he wouldn't amount to much. His teachers didn't see his brilliance. But that didn't change the fact that he was destined to change the world. What if he had accepted their opinion as truth? Much like him, you refused to be defined by the judgments of those who couldn't see your worth. And now, the joke is on them. You were always the one destined for greatness. And while they try to make sense of how they missed it, you are living proof that betting against someone with true purpose is never a gamble anyone can afford to lose. But the question remains, will they ever learn from their mistake, or will they continue to watch from afar as you walk in the fullness of God's plan? Betrayal as a catalyst for transformation. They thought their betrayal would break you, that it would leave you weak, isolated, and defeated. They assumed their actions would push you into retreat, forcing you into a corner where you would remain powerless. But what they didn't realize was that their very betrayal became the catalyst for your transformation. Instead of destroying you, it ignited a fire within you, one that pushed you further than you ever imagined. The wound they inflicted was not the end, it was the beginning of your ascent. Consider Joseph, the son of Jacob, whose own brothers betrayed him out of envy. They sold him into slavery, thinking they had erased his future, Genesis 37:23-28. But in reality, they unknowingly set him on the path toward his destiny. Through trials and tribulations, Joseph rose to power in Egypt, ultimately saving his family and an entire nation. What seemed like a cruel betrayal was actually part of God's divine plan. Could it be that the pain you endured was necessary for the purpose you were meant to fulfill? At first, their actions felt like a crushing blow. The betrayal was raw, disorienting, and deeply painful. But over time, you realized that it wasn't just a scar to carry. It was fuel. It forced you to examine yourself, to tap into strength you never knew you had. The loss became your lesson. You had no choice but to grow, to evolve, to become someone far stronger than you were before, not out of bitterness or revenge, but out of necessity. You could no longer remain where you were, and that realization changed everything. They thought they had wounded you beyond repair, but instead they unintentionally pushed you into your power. What they saw as a betrayal was, in reality, a divine turning point in your journey. Just as David's years of being hunted by Saul shaped him into a mighty king, 1 Samuel 18-30, your trials refined you, sharpened you, and prepared you for a level of greatness they could never have anticipated. Did they really think they could set traps against someone God has already anointed? History is filled with stories of those who turned trial into triumph. Take Thomas Edison, who was told as a child by his teacher that he was too stupid to learn. Had he accepted that label, the world would have never known the brilliance of the electric light bulb. Instead of allowing rejection to define him, he used it as motivation to prove his purpose. Just like him, you refuse to let their betrayal limit your future. Now, as you walk in your purpose, you thrive in ways you once only dreamed of. Their actions, painful as they were, became the very force that propelled you into a greater version of yourself. They didn't just hurt you, they helped create the person who would rise above them all. And the irony, they never saw it coming. Will they ever understand that their betrayal didn't break you but built you? Or will they be left watching as you continue to rise, unstoppable, into the fullness of your destiny? When Sen chose familiar dysfunction, they didn't choose something better, they chose something familiar. The dysfunction, the chaos, the instability. It wasn't superior to you in any way, it was simply a mirror of what was already inside them. They gravitated toward the messy, the broken, and the toxic, not because it offered them anything meaningful, but because it allowed them to remain exactly as they were. Choosing you would have required something they weren't ready to face: growth, accountability, and healing. And instead of rising to meet that challenge, they retreated into what felt safe, even if it was self-destructive. Think about the Israelites in the wilderness. After being freed from Egypt, instead of embracing the promise of a new life, they longed to return to their chains. Exodus 16:3. Why? Because slavery was familiar. Even though God was leading them toward abundance, they clung to the past, too afraid to step into something greater. Just like them, the person who betrayed you chose captivity over transformation. They weren't prepared to leave behind the comfort of dysfunction. You didn't just bring love, you brought clarity. You were stable while they were unstable. You were a foundation while they were crumbling. And that terrified them. To truly be with you, they would have had to confront their own brokenness, face their demons, and put in the work to heal. That meant taking responsibility for their actions, owning up to past mistakes and making hard choices, the kind of choices that lead to real transformation. But they weren't interested in that. They wanted ease, not effort. So, instead of choosing the one thing that could have led them to a better version of themselves, they took the easy road, the one that demanded nothing from them. And where has that road led? Now they find themselves stuck in the very chaos they chose, trying to justify their poor decisions while watching you move forward in strength and grace. Do they even realize what they've done? Do they understand that, in rejecting you, they weren't just losing a relationship, they were losing the best opportunity they had to grow? History is filled with those who chose what was easy over what was right. Take Judas, for example. He walked beside Jesus, witnessing miracles, hearing divine wisdom, and yet for 30 pieces of silver, he chose betrayal, Matthew 26:14-16. And where did it leave him? In deep regret, consumed by the very decision he thought would benefit him. Like Judas, the person who turned away from you may not have understood the weight of their choice until it was too late. Now, as you continue walking in clarity and purpose, they remain trapped in the cycle they refuse to break. The truth is, they never truly lost you. They lost themselves. And as long as they keep choosing what's easy over what's right, they will remain in the very chaos they created. Will they ever wake up and realize what they threw away? Or will they continue circling the same mistakes while you soar to new heights? Outsiders to your story. They are now outsiders to a story they were meant to be a part of. At one point they had a chance to co-author something extraordinary, something far greater than themselves, but they didn't recognize it. They failed to see that your journey wasn't just about you. It was about both of you building something meaningful together. They were meant to be part of the foundation, intricately woven into the framework of a story designed for greatness. Yet by choosing betrayal, by turning away when they should have stood beside you, they unknowingly wrote themselves out of the narrative. Does this not bring to mind the story of Judas Iscariot, who walked alongside Jesus, witnessed his miracles, and heard his wisdom firsthand, only to throw it all away for temporary gain?
Matthew 26:14-16.
He had every opportunity to be part of something eternal, but his own choices led him to the outside, watching as history unfolded without him. And just like Judas, those who betrayed you believed they were making a decision in their favor, not realizing they were cutting themselves off from something priceless. Now, as you continue to rise, to evolve, and to walk in the fullness of your calling, they remain stuck in a past chapter that no longer fits. The story has moved forward, and no matter how much they may want to rewrite their role, the truth is undeniable. They are no longer in the picture. Do they finally understand what they lost? Do they recognize that, by choosing to walk away, they forfeited something that could have blessed them beyond measure? Think of people throughout history who have turned away from those destined for greatness, only to later realize their mistake when it was too late. The teacher who dismissed Albert Einstein as an underachiever never imagined he would become one of the greatest minds in history. The record executives who rejected the Beatles could not have foreseen that they would change the music industry forever. How often do people underestimate what is right in front of them, only to live with regret once the truth is revealed? But you didn't wait. Even when the pain of loss threatened to weigh you down, even when moving forward felt like walking through fire, you pressed on. With each step you built a new narrative, one richer, more fulfilling, and more powerful than anything they could have envisioned. The success, the peace, the growth, it's all yours. And now they stand at a distance, watching, unable to undo what has already been set in motion. There was a time when they could have been part of your journey. They could have walked alongside you, sharing in the blessings, the victories, and the fulfillment of a divine purpose. But that time has passed. Their absence is no longer a wound. It's simply the reality of a choice they made. A door sealed shut. They thought they were simply walking away, but they didn't realize they were sealing the door behind them. What they failed to see was that leaving you wasn't just about losing a connection, it was about losing access to the person you were becoming. You were never a finished product. You were a work in progress, divinely molded, shaped, and strengthened each day. And now, they stand on the outside, no longer able to reach you. Did they ever stop to think that the version of you they rejected was not your final form, that God was refining you into something greater? This is what happened to the Israelites when they doubted Moses and longed to return to Egypt. Numbers 14:1-4. God had set them on a path to the promised land, but their lack of faith made them blind to his greater plan. Because of their doubt and disobedience, they lost access to the future God had prepared for them. Similarly, those who betrayed you had a place in your journey, but they forfeited it. And now, no matter how much they wish to come back, the door no longer opens for them. They may try to waltz back in, expecting to find the same version of you, the one who once tolerated their behavior, excused their actions, and left a place for them in your life. But that person no longer exists. You've transformed, grown, and elevated beyond their reach. Do they even realize that what they lost is now unattainable? Do they understand that God has led you into a new season, one where their presence is no longer required? Look at the story of King Saul and David. Saul once had God's favor, but due to his pride, disobedience, and jealousy, he lost his anointing. 1 Samuel 15:23. God raised up David instead, a man after his own heart. Saul spent the rest of his days trying to reclaim something that was no longer his, but the truth remained: he had lost access. Just like Saul, those who walked away from you never imagined that their decision would be irreversible. But some doors, once shut, never reopen. Now, as you continue thriving, as you step into the blessings God always had for you, they can only watch from a distance. Does it sting them to see you flourish without them? Do they regret choosing betrayal over loyalty, selfishness over love? Maybe they thought they were making the right move at the time, but now they see the truth. They didn't just lose you. They lost access to a future they were meant to be part of. Ultimate regret. They thought they were betting against you, but in reality, they were betting against their own destiny. And what hurts them the most isn't just that they lost you. It's that they lost the version of themselves they could have become had they chosen differently. They traded long-term blessings for temporary satisfaction, but now they must live with the weight of knowing they let something irreplaceable slip through their fingers. But here's what they failed to understand. Your worth, your value, and your purpose were never dependent on their approval. God's plan for you was always bigger than their betrayal. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. Jeremiah 29. And now, your success, your peace, and your growth stand as undeniable proof that they made the wrong choice. While they remain trapped in the past, wondering what could have been, your story continues to unfold exactly as God intended. You were the blessing they couldn't see. And now they have no choice but to live with the regret of never being worthy of it. As they sit in silence, watching from a distance, trapped in the past while you soar into a future they can no longer touch, what runs through their minds when they see you thriving without them? Do they finally understand that their betrayal was not just a mistake, it was a defining moment that forever altered their destiny? Perhaps they assumed they could return whenever they pleased, as if life would pause and wait for them. But life moved forward, you moved forward, and now they are left with nothing but memories of a time when they still had access to you. This is the consequence of failing to recognize what is truly valuable. It reminds us of the rich man in Luke 16:19-31, who lived in comfort while Lazarus, the poor man, suffered at his gate. The rich man ignored Lazarus, failing to see the significance of his presence. But when death came, the roles reversed. Lazarus was comforted in heaven, while the rich man found himself in torment, begging for just a drop of water. His pleas were in vain because the time for redemption had passed. Doesn't this reflect the way some people treat those who are meant to bless their lives? They dismiss, overlook, and discard, only to later realize the value of what they lost when it's too late to reclaim it. That is the bitter reality they must now face. They walked away thinking they were making a choice in their favor. But they never considered that by turning their back on you, they were also turning away from the version of themselves that could have grown alongside you. They had the chance to build, to evolve, to share in something extraordinary. But their pride, their fear, and their selfishness led them astray. And now, they are left on the outside, watching as you step fully into the person God always intended you to be. Have they realized yet that some doors once closed will never open again? Do they finally understand that the divine plan for your life never hinged on their presence? Behold, I have set before you an open door, which no one is able to shut. Revelation 3:8. The doors God has opened for you now are for your future, not for those who chose to walk away from your past. And while they remain stuck in regret, you continue to rise. The pain they once caused has only made you stronger. Every betrayal became a lesson. Every disappointment became a stepping stone. What they meant for harm, God has turned into a testimony of resilience and divine favor, just as he did with Joseph when his brothers sold him into slavery, Genesis 50:20. They thought they were writing you out of your own story, but all they did was remove themselves from the masterpiece God was creating in your life. Now, as they watch from the shadows, they may wish they could undo the past, but you no longer hold space for their apologies, their regrets, or their attempts to make amends out of guilt. The version of you they once knew is gone, and the person you have become is far beyond their reach. Perhaps they will always wonder what might have been if they had chosen differently, but that is no longer your concern. You have stepped into a new chapter, one of healing, abundance, and divine purpose. And as you walk in the fullness of God's plan, the only thing left for them to do is watch from a distance, knowing they lost something they can never regain, a weight of their choices. As they watch you from the sidelines, their hearts wrestle with the weight of their own choices. They once believed they had all the time in the world, that they could leave and return at their convenience. But now they realize that the door is not only closed, it has been sealed by your transformation. Do they finally understand that walking away was more than just a temporary decision, that it was a permanent shift that changed the course of their lives forever? This is what happens when people underestimate God's chosen ones. They assumed you would always be available, always waiting, always willing to accept less than you deserve. But God had other plans. He was using every betrayal, every rejection, and every loss to refine you into something even greater. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose, Romans 8:28. What they meant for your harm, God turned into your elevation. Look at the story of Noah. For years he built the ark as God commanded, warning those around him of the coming flood, Genesis 6-7. Yet they laughed, mocked, and dismissed him, believing that life would continue as it always had. But when the rain finally came and the waters rose, they realized too late that they had lost their chance. The door to the ark had been shut, not by Noah, but by God Himself. They cried out, but there was no way back in. Isn't this exactly what has happened to those who walked away from you? They mocked your journey, dismissed your purpose, and took your presence for granted, only to realize when it was too late that they had lost something they could never get back. They may try to convince themselves that they made the right decision, that they never needed you, that they have no regrets. But deep down, every victory you achieve, every step you take toward greatness, reminds them of the undeniable truth. They underestimated you. They assumed you would crumble without them, but instead you flourished. They expected you to be broken, but instead you healed. And now they are left wondering, how did I not see this before? This is the painful reality of those who fail to value God's chosen ones. They realize too late that what they discarded was priceless, and now they live in the shadow of their own mistake. It's the same lesson that Pharaoh learned when he refused to let the Israelites go. He thought he had all the power, that he could control the outcome. But as each plague struck, as God's hand moved mightily on behalf of His people, Pharaoh realized too late that he was on the losing side, Exodus 7-12. And when he finally let them go, thinking he could still reclaim what he had lost, the waters of the Red Sea swallowed him and his army whole. Exodus 14:26-28. Isn't this what happens to those who betray and abandon God's chosen ones? They believe they are making the right choice, that they are in control, until they realize that they have set themselves against the very hand of God. By the time they understand the magnitude of their error, they are already drowning in the consequences. And now, as they watch you from a distance, they may wonder if there is a way back in. But the truth is, some doors are closed forever, not out of anger, not out of spite, but because their role in your story has ended. Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces, Matthew 7:6. You are no longer in a place where you have to explain your worth to those who failed to see it. Their regret will never be your burden to carry. The weight of their choices belongs to them alone. While they dwell in what could have been, you are walking fully in what is. While they replay the past, you are creating the future. And no matter how much they long to step back into your world, they can't, because that version of you no longer exists. False inclusion, your unstoppable rise. Now you walk in purpose. Now you step boldly into every blessing that was always meant for you. You are no longer looking back, no longer questioning, no longer waiting for anyone to realize what they had. Because your journey was never dependent on their loyalty. Your destiny was never tied to their presence. So let them watch. Let them wonder. Let them carry the weight of their own choices. Because while they are stuck in the past, trying to rewrite a story that has already moved on, you are living in the fullness of God's promises. And that is something they will never be able to take away. As we conclude today's message, remember that being God's chosen one means you are a beacon of light, a true blessing to others. But not everyone will recognize this. Just like the betrayal you faced, sometimes those closest to you may fail to see the purity of your heart and the value of your spirit. Yet despite these challenges, God's love for you remains unshakable. You are a real blessing to the world, even when others may turn against you. If this message resonated with you, please comment 777 as a sacred signal that you're ready to step into the next season. May God bless you abundantly in all areas of your life. Keep shining His light, and remember, no matter what betrayal you face, God has an amazing plan for you. Stay strong, and see you in the next one.